Welcome back, friends, and we're excited to joining you again today, and you joining us. And we want to let you know what's going on MGoBlue Podcast coming up on Thursday. Really excited about this interview with Conquering Heroes. It's the men's lacrosse head coach Kevin Conry. Big time win this past weekend over the number one team in the country. That's the Maryland Terrapins. Took them down. And he's going to give us insight as to how that took place, what they've learned to this point this year, and what the rest of the season looks like. But that was a huge win in College Park for the Wolverines. Already out, defend the block. Two unbelievable episodes. So if you haven't listened to these, you got to make sure you do it. It is Brian Bush from Denver after the wins over UC San Diego in the first round of the NCAA tournament, and then to get to the Sweet 16, a big-time win over Texas A&M. Almost said dominant, Brian, but I'm not going to say dominant. It was just a big-time win to get to the Sweet 16. Also, the radio replay of Inside Michigan basketball. That happened on Monday night. The replay is out, and it's got head coach Dusty May and assistant Mike Boynton Jr. Excited to hear those and excited to see this basketball team play yet another game and a trip to the Sweet 16. What a turnaround for this Michigan basketball program. And Brian, I know it's all started with Dusty May and the transfer portal, him obviously, and coaching. You get these guys in. I'd love to hear from you. What's different now? Because we'll get to our 7 from 77 and we'll get to our guest later on. I'll let you introduce him. But what's different now than 2 weeks left in the regular season? Because they go on that run in the Big Ten tournament. And I had actually asked the question after losing to, was it Wisconsin? Who were the three losses? I know Michigan State was the last game of the season, but there were a couple of really, and even the wins, the Nebraska win, painful watch. It was a win, but I didn't know if they would win another game. And then they win the Big Ten tournament, 2 rounds now inside the NCAA tournament. What's different?
Well, I'll tell you this to start. If you try to figure out what 18 to 22-year-old individuals are going to do, you probably should get out of the prognostication business because you're right. Down the stretch, and it's difficult to know game to game, week to week. But yeah, they finished 2-4 in the regular season. The Nebraska win 49-46, then the Namari Burnett game winner, then 2 straight home losses to Illinois and Maryland, going to East Lansing, never really being all that competitive. I think the reset helped, and I think this team's kind of falling into almost an 8-man rotation with the injuries to Sam Walters and now the injury/portal for Justin Pippen. This team kind of fell into the right puzzle that has really fit well, and LJ Kaysen's emerged. Vlad Golden's playing like the best center in the country, and the real difference maker, obviously against Texas A&M. I'm not going on a limb by saying it was Roddy Gale Jr., but Michigan just needed something from that wing position, and they got it from both Gale and Reuben Jones. Reuben Jones, I think, had maybe his best performance of the season, and he's a more tangential player, off to the side, background type of a guy. Gale scored, but Jones did a lot of things really important as well. It's been a fascinating process, and for this team to out-rebound the best rebounding team in the country by 9, and to deal Texas A&M its first loss in offensive rebounds since the middle of January in that game. It was just 1, but that's their identity. That'd be like outgaining Michigan football on the ground, right? If you do that, you got a great chance to win. Offensive rebounding, several people said it leading up to it. A&M's offense starts when the shot goes off the rim, which is weird to say, but it's how they Buzz Williams called it a tractor pull, and Michigan made that tractor really heavy down the stretch.
It's tough to go into a game thinking you're going to miss shots to start your offense.
Heck of a recruiting pitch for guards, though, to be like, hey, you want to come? We'll let you shoot as much as you want. Even if you don't do well, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. But it's been fun. It's been a hell of a run. You and T Mills on the broadcast have been outstanding. And when I say outstanding, it's not just the final call. I love the giggle by Terry Mills. All right. As somebody who loves to step on the play-by-play voice, I'm here to tell you on a home team broadcast, we try and avoid that. But when you have T Mills and me on the football broadcast, our emotion gets the best of us. And I have absolutely loved, and I'm begging for, I don't want the buzzer beater, or I'd like to have a little bit of cushion in the last couple minutes of the game. But if it's going to be that way, give me more T Mills underneath the insane Brian Bush and the giggle. It's as good as it gets in college.
Yeah, I definitely drove over Terry on that Trey Donaldson flip up. He was trying to say put in the blender, and I'm like, nope, hold on, T. You start your chuckling. We were right in front of that play, and that truly was one of the most improbable shots I've ever seen live. And it goes to show you, Michigan won by 12, yet if that does not fall, and the Wade Taylor 3 shortly thereafter, which was like 5/6 down, not even halfway down. That thing the net had started to move and it somehow popped out for Michigan to win it like that. It shows you the margins are thin, but if you take care of those, you can get it done. So those listening on audio, we've got a great conversation later with Max Bredeson. We'll share that with you. That's audio only, video only. Jon teased it. If you're just listening on the podcast version, we're going to have Kyle Church stopping by at about 11:45 this morning to talk all things Michigan basketball. Excited to visit with who I've dubbed the closer, the Mariano Rivera of Michigan basketball. We'll go into that a little bit when we have Kyle on. But, Jon, this is In the Trenches, and I'm going to throw you a bone in a little while here on the 7 from 77. But
just leave me enough time.
I know. We're going to have to hurry. But let's get into our 7 from 77. Number one, Jon, spring ball's underway. Only a few practices in. Saturday the 1st in pads. What have your early takeaways been?
Technically sound. And it's impressive that this team is playing technically sound because it's a new offense, a lot of new players defensively, even though some guys are stepping up to fill roles. They're in different roles. They're using guys differently. But offensively, you've got some young offensive linemen. And again, we'll make sure we save enough time to talk about this offensive line. But, when you're talking about the quarterback position, Jaden Davis is the only guy that's taken reps that has any experience playing with all the new pieces, but some of those that are back from last year. And it's Mikey Keene and it's Underwood. Those guys have done a tremendous job. And we talked about this, I think it was a couple of weeks ago. Maybe it's even a month ago now. This offseason's absolutely flying by. I'm so glad we're in spring ball. I got actually contact football to talk about and watch. But it's the offseason work that these guys have done. And I asked Ben about it, so you'll hear that in
Max.
The audio. I'm sorry, Max. Yes. I actually bring up Ben.
I know you do.
But yeah, Max Bredeson, Captain Bredeson. That way I can reference either one if I say Captain Bredeson. But it's the individual work that these guys have been doing with assistant coaches, with assistants to assistants, and whether it's Juan Castillo, it's Eric Campbell, all of these guys that they have brought in to help tutor and mentor and bring along receivers, quarterbacks, offensive linemen. It's that work is really starting to pay off now because they're getting really good work in now that they're in pads. And everything changes, right, when you get in pads, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a minute. But they have a baseline of an expectation of what the coaches want, how they want it done, what steps they're supposed to take, all of those different things. And it's been a lot of fun watching them now put the pads on and see them take the next step. A lot of wide eyes. First introduction to pads at the college level, and some of those guys have really shown up.
So number two, you mentioned those padded practices versus non-padded. Take me through that. Sherrone Moore has said, and he said it on Monday, quote, "We want to hit and tackle and see what we're really all about," end quote. And obviously that's an important piece to it. But how do you differentiate, compare and contrast a padded practice at this time of year versus a non-padded practice?
Well, the non-padded practice is for all those cute guys that are, chasing after passes, and they're throwing passes down the field. They're not under distress or duress. There's no contact. It's shorts and skirts. It's the next step of progression of helmets on. Make sure that you can do all those things that we just talked about, steps, hat placement, all those different things are now taken to the next step. And you get 2 practices like that before you put on the man gear and you actually go and play real football. So the running backs look great. Defensive backs, they're flying around. Nobody has to worry about anybody hitting them, blocking them. Wide receivers, you have to worry about going up and catching a ball because nobody's going to hit you. Those guys are having fun. They're talking trash. And that's what I like. There's good energy at practice. But when you put the pads on, things change. The momentum changes. Everything will change. And I think it was Tyson who said, everybody's got a plan to get hit in the mouth. And you could sit there in your stance as an offensive lineman and, you could take all the right steps. But as soon as you come off the ball and now you have to actually deliver a blow, what does it do to your technique? How does it change your focus? Because when you're talking about a fourth or a fifth year guy, they've been doing it and it's been repetitive. And so the steps, they could do that in their sleep. A lot of those things, like I did it for so long, I could still wake up and take the steps. Now, having to hit someone or get hit, that's where it changes for me. And it changes for these young players as well, because you have to be able to focus on, where am I going to put my head? You have to start looking at the linebackers. What does that mean for the defensive line? Are they going to be moving at the snap? All of those different things, they throw a wrench in the works. And some guys go bonkers when that happens. And it's okay. This is the time to do that. So all of a sudden you put the pads on and the first handful of plays on both sides, they kind of look like garbage. And then you get a chance to look at the film and they have that instant feedback because they got the film on the sidelines now, and it slows things down. You can then anticipate, okay, this is what's going to happen. Here are the very minimal plays that we have in. I need to focus on, on these steps. I need to focus on this when I'm catching the ball. I need to focus on, whether it's coming out of a break as a wide receiver and dropping my shoulders to sell a deep route. Some of those things are all, they're just the details that separate and make you a better player, but they're what makes plays successful.
So kind of tangential to that, but I think still a relevant conversation. It's number 3 on our 7 from 77. Coach Moore, along with the two coordinators, Wink Martindale and Chip Lindsey, emphasized in their recent media availability the fact that it's early. They've preached that, not trying to make any broad observations, locking down anything. There are a few players we know are going to be key contributors to this, but everything else, pretty blank canvas. What does it look like to balance reps, and what position groups are easier or more difficult to get reps with the quote unquote ones or twos when ones and twos is they're as fluid as they are right now?
That's a great question. And there's really no good answer for it because, defensively, they got some guys coming back. And, Derek Brown is going to be an edge guy. Jaishawn Barham is going to be there. He's going to be moving around. Ernest Hausman is going to be a linebacker. Rayshawn Benny is going to be a defensive tackle. So those guys know what is expected of them. And they're going out and they're working on some of the more intricate things of their position. Whereas you look at the wide receivers, you look at the running back room, you look at the quarterback, really the entire offense and some of the secondary, now that's where you're talking about splitting reps. And you want to make sure that you're getting good work. And so it's the juggling act is, okay, between Jaden Davis and Underwood and all of the quarterbacks, Keen. Now, all of a sudden, you have to think, okay, in this play, who knows it best? Who is going to be able to deliver it? Because I want to be able to evaluate the ones and twos at receivers. And I want to be able to evaluate them against the ones and twos of the secondary. It's trying to construct those. And that's why all of these practices are scripted. And yeah, I can script it so that, Bryce gets, 10 reps. And then all of a sudden, hey, Jaden Davis gets 10 reps. But there may be different reps. And then as you bring along Bryce, as you bring along, all of these different guys, you start exposing them to more. But that's the beauty of they're not preparing for a game right now. They don't have to put in a game plan. There's not a scripted 10, or 15 play script to start a game. It's a scripted practice. Some guys are going to be exposed to more things than others. It's the same with the offensive line. Balaboa at left tackle. He is at a completely different level. He's going to go into his second padded practice later today on Tuesday, whereas Evan Link has all those starting games from last year. He's got right tackle experience. He's got left tackle experience from the bowl game. So you script things for those guys going against certain defenses, and that's where you've got to have great communication between Chip Lindsey, and Wink Martindale. Okay, this is what we want to accomplish in this period. Here are the first 5 plays. Here's what we want to do. Wink, what do you want? And okay, the next 5, Wink, this is, we want to script these for you. What do you want from us? And it's not the look squad. It's just, what do I have in our repertoire with this group of guys that's going to give Wink what he needs for his group of guys? I don't know if that, I mean, it gets a little bit jumbled up, but that's why you script these practices. And then you look back and you say, okay, well, I've got all of these reps for all of these different guys, and they all match up. Hey, everybody get 50 reps. Everybody gets 45 reps, whatever it is, but they're going to be at different levels at different times.
No, all makes sense. Number 4 on our 7 from 77. You mentioned one of the players who definitely, I think even coaches are willing to talk about as a important piece. The question is what that piece looks like, and that's Jaishawn Barham. Sherrone Moore simply said, quote, "I just want to see him on the field because he's a really good football player," end quote. Wink Martindale alluded to the fact that maybe the matchup, the game plan week to week could dictate if he's more rusher versus linebacker. How can Michigan right now experiment with Barham in preparation for August 30th and beyond?
Some of it is going to depend on what the other guys are doing. If Jaishawn Barham is lined up at edge, what can Jimmy Rolder do in his position at linebacker? And what does that, how much does that open up the defense? And for Jaishawn, yeah, they want to be able to, he wants to showcase himself as a guy that can go out there and make plays. Wants to showcase himself as an edge guy, as a linebacker, off the ball linebacker, be able to drop into coverage, all of those different things for goals that he has. The number one goal here at Michigan is winning games and sacking the quarterback, creating opportunities for the offense. And I think Jaishawn is going to have that opportunity at edge. I'm really excited to see him. And it's not like he didn't last year. I didn't like this, and I was very vocal about it, whether it was on the broadcast or in podcasts, where I don't like him lined up in essence as the nose on top of the center. That's one area where if he's going to do that, or Wink's going to continue to put him in that position, I need to see improvement during spring ball. How does he attack Greg Crippen when Greg Crippen's the center? How does he shed the hands of an offensive lineman when he gets punched in the chest? Because you're not going to avoid contact at every single time. Where I'm really excited is when they rush him off the edge or from an off the ball position. How can he use his athletic ability to just go untouched? And whether it's a spin move, a rip move, swim move, something like that around an offensive lineman, but also how can he turn from speed to power? That's one thing that's really difficult for guards and centers to do, is to block a linebacker that's a much better athlete in their own minds and going downhill and switch from, okay, he just tried to get me on the swim move. Now I need to make sure, one, I defend that swim move or the spin. But if he goes from speed to power, how do I defend that? How do I drop my anchor and set a wall? So that's where Jaishawn Barham can really improve what this defense has the ability to do. But again, it's all going to go down to, if he's not at linebacker, if he's at edge, or if he's rushing the quarterback, what does that mean for Ernest Hausman? We saw him and his ability to drop in the Washington game, right? One just goes over his hands. He sees the same thing. He makes the adjustment and he drops a little bit deeper, gets an interception. Those are the different things that you need to see from Ernest, from Jimmy Rolder, from that linebacking group that will allow Wink to use Ernest or to use Jaishawn Barham in a lot of different ways.
All right, we're about 10 minutes from, on the audio side, Max Bredeson, the video side, men's basketball assistant Kyle Church. Don't take all 10 minutes, but you got a good chunk of time. Number 5, offensive line thoughts here at the early stage of spring ball.
I like what I've seen from Cripp at center. I think he's done a really good job of improving some of the technique. He's got the skill, but it's about going out and executing it, and it's mastering the craft of being a center. You start every play with one arm between your legs. What are you doing with that off arm? What are you doing with your feet? What's your balance like? You're not always going to be on balance. How do you rebalance? And I like what I've seen from him. The question more is going to be, and I know we had a question a couple of weeks ago about Giovanni Alhadi. He's going to have to be a player that really steps up and plays that guard position at a high level. They're counting on him. I'm counting on him. And it's It's about being able to recognize what's going on more than just what's in front of you, being able to anticipate. I mentioned this just a little bit ago about recognizing where the linebackers are, recognizing the coverage, all of those things. Everybody thinks offensive lineman is just a big guy, block him. It's not it. You've got to be able to understand everything that's going on so that you can know if that 3 technique, is he going to cross my face? Is he going to play out? Is this what am I setting? Is he setting me up for a game? And I got to hand that off with the tackle. He's also going to have different tackles that he's playing next to. And I know he got a little bit of an introduction to Andrew Sprague in the bowl game, but those are things that they're going to have to iron out and work out. But he needs both those guys, Crip and Gio, are both going to have big seasons. Now, you start talking about some of these young guys, and whether it's Sprague at right tackle, and we saw Evan Link play a really good game against Alabama in the bowl game at left tackle. Some of the younger players like Babaloa, very raw. I mean, he's had now 1 practice in pads. I like his athletic ability. What I like most about him is the prospect of having some height and some length at the tackle position. And you look at Brady Norton, who is a transfer. And I like his position versatility. He may eventually be the guy that they put in there at left guard. He could play tackle. He could play center. He's a guy that could play all 5 spots. And I like that versatility. Does it mean he's going to be one of the starting 5? I don't know. But as we've seen, a couple of years ago, what did I talk about with that offensive line? The interchangeable pieces up front. Whether it was Keegan who goes down and all of a sudden Gio goes in and you don't miss anything. It's Crip and going in at the center position and rotating with other guys at that position. It's having as much depth as possible and then figuring out who gives you the best chance to move the ball. Who are the best 5? And it might eventually be, I know I've talked about Sprague at right, and I think it's his best fit. But what do you do with Evan Link? Do you leave him at left if Babaloa is ready? Do you put him in there and move Link back? Or do you bump him inside? Maybe he's the guard. Because I think at the next level, that's where Evan Link eventually plays. The pieces are there. It's really now about Grant Newsome, Juan Castillo, all of the individuals in this building that know a little bit about offensive line play, of trying to put their minds together. Okay, what is the combination that's going to give us the best opportunity to go out there, move the ball? And the pieces are there. Now it's just a matter of finding that combination. And then if injuries are going to happen, if one guy goes down, who is it that you put in and how does that shuffle everybody up front? Because there are some really good options. Nathan Afobe, I think has looked good as well at that left guard spot. So it's going to be a lot of fun watching this offensive line develop, because there's some raw talent. Some very raw talent, but the potential is the ceiling is very high.
I love asking you questions about the offensive line because I try to come up with witty things to come back after you're done, and I had like 4 of them. I'll go with this. I wish we could change In the Trenches to Big Guy Block Him podcast. That'd be good.
Yes. That's the perception, right?
Maybe after another 500 episodes. We'll see.
Yes.
All right. Number 6 out of 7 from 77. I thought this quote from Monday in Sherrone Moore's press conference was interesting. You don't know what you don't know until you get into the seat. Of course, Sherrone Moore had some opportunities to coach this team as the head man on Saturdays in 2023, but now it's 365. How have you seen the experience from last year benefit Coach Moore here in a full cycle here in 2025?
Some of it is trusting your coaches to do what you hired them to do. And other times it's, okay, I trust these coaches, but this is how I want it done. And vocalizing to them, these are the adjustments I want you to make because I need to see something different from whether it's offensive line, it's the quarterback, it's just how you run the offense. That's where his expertise is. And I think probably a little bit less on the defensive side of things, because I think all the best offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators could do both, because they've got to understand as much about the other side of the ball as your best defensive coordinators, but trusting Wink. And I think there was a lot of trust built up in the final 3-4 weeks of the season, certainly in the bowl game, when you had a chance to see this iteration of guys go out there. It's also, when I talk about constructing the practice and scripting the practices, this is a unique year where you have a very high-level talent coming in at the quarterback position. Underwood. I'm not going to dance around the subject. And everybody expects him to be the starter. How do you manage that with the experience of Mikey Keene? And how do you manage that with the conversations with Bryce Underwood, with Mikey Keene, with Jaden Davis, who's still in the mix? And I think having a year of experience of having some of those conversations, it was a very tough year at quarterback last year, and when to pull a guy, when to put another guy in, how to bring those guys along and handle that position in and of itself, a wide receiver position as well. You got to have somebody step up at that position. And I think he's done a nice job of addressing the talent needs through the portal, through recruiting, but also expecting more and not just throwing the guys that were here under the bus. Did they underperform? Yes. Did the quarterback, did the offense in general, everybody? Yes, they underperformed. Why is that? And all of those lessons learned over that 365, as you put it, are coming, you're paying dividends now with how they're constructing the practice and how they are constructing the meetings, how they're coaching certain things. And I think Chip Lindsey bringing in a new perspective as well is really helping on that front.
Wrap it up 7 from 77. Again, our audio guest, Max Bredeson, moments away. Statistically, of course, his return isn't earth-shattering. But one more year for Max, the leader, the potential 2-time captain, the example for other guys, and just the full-throttle football dude that young man is. What does that do for this team?
I'm not going to, ruin the whole interview, but I did ask him the question, what's your leadership style? And because I've seen enough, and I was really curious as how he was going to answer that. He's not a super vocal guy. It's turn the film on and watch me go block. Watch me run through a brick wall for this team. It's watch me work out. And where do I put my hand? Hand's supposed to be on the line, hands on the line. And, just a little whisper to the guy next to him. Hey, what the hell are you doing? And making sure that everybody, because then it works its way down the line. There's a certain standard that Max Bredeson, when he enters the building and he enters a room, when he doesn't say a lot, but when he does say something, guys are very alert. They're very perceptive as to what Max is up to and the energy that he brings to a practice. And I tell you this, it was so much fun to watch him put the pads on again, because again, he's not a vocal guy, but when he has to make a hole and clear a lane, he certainly does it. And guys recognize that. Obviously, defensive guys, they don't want to be that guy in front of them, but offensive guys, this is how it's supposed to be done. I talk about hat and hands all the time. His hat and hands are always in the right place, always doing the right thing. And that example that he sets really permeates throughout the rest of the team, offense or defense or special teams.
Maybe not a vocal voice, but would you say vocal pads?
Oh, yes. Yeah. You hear the pop, and it is energizing, to say the least.
Can he be more statistically impactful? Do you see him as a guy who can develop into, whether it is a potential down the line pass catching guy or maybe a short yard to gain runner? Can that be added to him? Would you want that to be a part of his 2025 game?
I do. What did he catch? 3 passes last year. And not that he's going to be a featured part of the pass game, but he can be one of those change of pace, never saw it coming, in instead of 2 or 3 catches, maybe it's 10 to 15 throughout the course of a season, but those could be very big plays. And here's the one thing I know about him is he is not going to be the fastest. But he will always be in the right place. Quarterbacks can trust him. Offensive line can trust him. If he's supposed to have my outside, I know Max is going to be there. But then when he does get in the open space, you want to talk about a guy that you could trust with the football, trust with the program. That's Max Bredeson. He's not going to put the ball on the ground. He will. I think he would give up a limb before he would give up the ball.
That's a perfect way to put it. That's how you lead by example. Hopefully that does not happen, but excited to see Max. Excited to hear from Max here. He is our audio guest on In the Trenches, presented by Meijer. Here on the video side of things, awaiting Kyle Church, Michigan assistant, here on our live stream, Michigan basketball against Auburn Friday night in Atlanta. What I'll be really curious about, Jon, is what the fan complexion will look like in Atlanta, because obviously we know Michigan travels and Michigan exists in a lot of these big cities. Michigan State does travel, and you got the other two teams. It's basically a Big Ten SEC challenge here. Auburn's not far from Atlanta, and Ole Miss is not far from Atlanta either. So tickets are going to be hard to come by. It's going to be a fascinating environment. And also, normally in that first game, teams of a certain, teams involved with the second game and fans involved with the second game latch on to somebody. Oftentimes it's the Cinderella. Sometimes it is somebody different. So I'll be really curious what that looks like in Atlanta for sure. As we welcome in our good friend, we've started to call him here as of late, the closer, the Mariano Rivera for Michigan men's basketball. That is assistant coach Kyle Church. Kyle, what's going on, man? I appreciate you making some time on a busy day.
Oh, of course. Thanks for having me. That's that's quite the compliment. I don't know if I've quite earned that just yet, but
so fans
explain why.
Yes,
Brian, whether it's you or Kyle, I want to know why you're the closer.
So I called him this leading up to the Wisconsin game because Kyle had the scout for the Badgers, and unlike the first two games in Indianapolis, Purdue, Michigan had played twice. Maryland, we saw him 10 days prior. So Kyle had that one, and then he also was part of the Texas A&M scout. So so far 2 for 2 on what's been the end of these multi-day road trips, Kyle. It's a unique spot to scout for a game you might not play, though, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, you have to motivate yourself a little bit to you don't know who. Obviously, you're very hopeful you'll win, but you don't know who's going to win on the other side of the bracket. But yeah, we gave each other a hard time as a staff. Like, just give me a chance, just get me to the game. And we'll make it happen. But no, we have a really good time as a staff, and just happy to be playing our best basketball at the right time of the year.
I want to ask you this because everything seemed to be different in that game against Texas A&M. And is this just a perception that we as fans as watching it didn't notice because it was, you out-rebounded them. And the turnovers, I think, were the biggest thing, where the turnovers were very limited. What was different, or what's been different in the tournament versus what we saw from this team in the regular season?
Yeah, I think specifically to A&M, we found a rhythm with how they defend. They run the that 3/4 court press, which kind of tries to throw off your timing a little bit. But if you can break it, you can find some holes in the back end. I know we made a three and had a couple driving kicks off the back end of the press, and then we really started to understand their heavy rotations. I think playing, honestly, the way the matchups worked out, playing San Diego first and then transitioning to them, there were a lot of similarities about how they maybe, not necessarily the size and athleticism, but they're ball dominant, over rotating. And we were able to kind of find a really, really nice rhythm. Obviously, guys, particularly, Roddy Gale and LJ kind of stepped up and made some plays, but finding that rhythm, the ball was moving. Vlad obviously does his thing inside, and Danny started getting to the rim, and we just hit a beautiful rhythm. And to score 56 against one of the best defensive teams in the country was unreal. And we left 3 or 4 layups on the table late that could have put an unbelievable number.
I know I got a few bumps and bruises from Terry from the broadcast in the second half. So there were more in the first half.
I got some from Drew, was on my right.
Can you speak to Roddy Gale Jr.'s ability to have that type of a game, how he made it happen and how his teammates empowered him to make that possible?
Yeah, my favorite part of this postseason, obviously the Big Ten championship, going to a Sweet 16, all that's amazing. But I think I speak for our whole staff here, is to see how excited Roddy's teammates were for him. Everything he's been through the last really 7 or 8 months, coming over from Ohio State, and then, having a great start to the season, and then obviously having a little bit of a prolonged shooting slump, for him to stay the course and be a great teammate and show up every day and keep working and keep working. It's a really good story for anybody, just of, perseverance and, keep your head down, keep working. Good things are going to happen. We shoot with them every single day. This coaching staff does, and we see him. I mean, it's nothing for him to make 15, 20, 30, 35 threes in a row. And then, the ball just would not find the bottom of the net there for a while for him. And his teammates see it. And he's one of the most likable guys on our roster. And it was so cool to see their joy for him. That's what being a team's all about.
Was that performance against Texas A&M, if you mirror that performance against Auburn, does that give you a chance to win? Or is there something that this team needs to continue to do better to get a win against Auburn?
Yeah. It'll put us right there. It'll put us right there. Obviously the rebounding is what really jumps off the page against Texas A&M. That's going to be huge against Auburn. Very similar makeup as far as big, strong, athletic team. Obviously a very good shooting team across the board. We're going to have a very, very similar effort. Janai Broome obviously gets all the headlines, but they have a stable of guards that can absolutely go score the ball, and they're very, very fast and quick. We'll have to pay more attention to that 3-point line than maybe we did against Texas A&M. But I think that mindset, that ball movement, that attention to detail on the glass and taking care of the ball will put us right in the game.
So 5 games in 9 days, capping off with that win over Texas A&M. Now, this will be one of the last Sweet 16 games of the Thursday-Friday stretch. How have you and the staff kind of structured this week from a player standpoint? I'll ask about your week because it's a little bit more detailed and a little more forward-thinking here in a bit. But from a player standpoint, how have you structured this, and how valuable is this time after a grind of a stretch, an NBA-esque style stretch here as of late?
Yeah, we were talking about it this morning as a staff. Yeah, 5 games in 9 days, all against a couple Sweet 16 teams, obviously all NCAA tournament teams, high level opponents, and we obviously play really good basketball. I think it's good to catch our breath a little bit. It's been a whirlwind. You can probably tell in my voice here, still a little.
Yours is better than Dusty's was post game on Saturday.
Yeah,
Dusty's was like stalling at right before the finish line in a car race.
We're all going through it a little bit as a staff. That's part of the portal being open and the NCAA tournament going on at the same time. It's interesting concept, but. Yes, having our guys, letting them get off their feet. We sent them home on Sunday when we got back. We let them sleep in. We watched a little film on Auburn yesterday just to give them a bird's eye view, just so they, had a little idea. And then we'll come in. We'll get after it today. They basically had 2 straight days off their legs, so. This will be hopefully a good, competitive, spirited practice. Get at their wind a little bit, and then we'll start to taper down and make these practices and preparations more mental as we get to Friday night.
How do you and the other assistant coaches divvy up? What are the expectations? While Dusty May is walking up and down the court side there, he's coaching the guys on the floor. When they come to the sidelines, they're always talking to you or one of the other assistant coaches. How do you divvy up what you're telling the players? How do you even know what Dusty May wants you to convey to the players?
Sure. Yeah, no, we have a great staff camaraderie. We have a great mix of guys from all over the place that have a ton of experience, even at a relatively young age for all of us. And we take a lot of pride in really, really working together. And honestly, without that, I don't think we beat Texas A&M. There was a ton of conversation going on about how to score, how to stop them. Obviously, our defense really stepped up there the last 10 minutes, but I felt our ability to work together as a staff and convey one unified message to the players was huge in that game specifically, but also on the year. And I think this helped our success. I think at the end of the day, we all just want to find what works best. And it doesn't have to be my answer. It doesn't have to be Coach Boyd's answer. It doesn't have to be Coach Joyner, Coach Keene, Coach Drew, Coach May, whatever, we all give our opinion, and we take the ego out of it and try to do whatever we think's best for the team in that given second. And, fortunately, we've gotten a few of these right recently.
Lastly, I mentioned, and you even alluded to the uniqueness of this week. The transfer portal opened you, in addition to being the assistant coach, as the general manager. How have you balanced it this last couple of days? And how much does this recent run help in those conversations? Because I think a lot of people were surprised how emphatic Dusty was about saying, we are here to win in year one. And in this year-to-year model, when you prove you can do it like you all have from last year's 8-win season and now, that's got to be one heck of a recruiting pitch, doesn't it?
Sure. Yeah, no, it definitely helps. I think having, sorry, we can't talk tonight, we're playing in the NCAA Sweet 16. That's a good excuse. But no, I think, it's another thing that's a huge collaboration amongst our staff. I technically, have the title, but it's something that we all share, and building the rock, we do it all together, and we bring guys to the table, and, we figure out what makes sense for this roster, for this team next year. Obviously, you're still projecting out. You don't know exactly, there will be some decisions to be made with our current guys, and, so we're doing the best we can to project out, but also at the end of the day, this is the biggest time of the year. This is why we work, 365 days, is to, take advantage of being in the NCAA tournament. And that certainly has our biggest priority.
Well, Kyle, can't thank you enough for making the time here during this very, very busy stretch. Good luck with the prep. Good luck with the portal, and we'll see you in Atlanta. All right.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate you having me.
Thanks, Coach.
There is Kyle Church. Great stuff from Kyle. Really thankful. It is crazy right now. We know it on the football side too, John, the fact that you have these incredible overlaps of the transfer portal, the college football playoff, the same deal here. But Kyle alluded to it. The fact you could say, "Oh, sorry, I couldn't text you back. I couldn't call you back. We're playing Auburn tonight."
Yeah, it's a nice pitch. I was curious too, and Brian, I don't know, in terms of talking to Dusty, you've got the ability, and I think Kyle could have spoke to this. I know he's got to get to other responsibilities other than talking to us, which I can't imagine what would be more important at this time. But when you are preparing for Auburn, right? It's a number one overall seed. If you don't win, you don't move on. But you also have to prepare for Michigan State, Ole Miss in the eventuality that you do win this game. You've got to turn the page and be ready to make it a push for the Final Four. How do the coaches, without looking ahead and not paying enough attention to Auburn, what type of resources do they put in place to pre-scout?
Yeah, so how it was structured for the Denver weekend, before the Big Ten tournament ended, Mike Boynton Jr., who is the most experienced member of the staff, he was a head coach at Oklahoma State before coming to Ann Arbor. He was the one who was told, hey, you're going to have the scout for the first tournament game. And genuinely, there is no, we all find out at the same time. Dusty, Mike, the rest of the staff finds out the exact same time as all of us where Michigan's playing in that NCAA tournament draw. And then from there, you schedule other assistants to have the scouts for the two potential opponents. So while Boynton was scouting UC San Diego, Kyle was already working a good chunk of that week on Texas A&M. And I think it was Justin Joyner was on Yale. So all that work that Justin Joyner put in, they didn't end up needing. The interesting thing, and what's fascinating about Dusty, and this isn't really a here and now question, I will ask him this during the offseason, but he is, I think, a little bit different than most head coaches, where he is out there when Michigan has had the second game. Dusty was out there watching the Illinois-Maryland game in the quarterfinals of the Big Ten. Dusty was actually in my seat, and he asked me if I needed him to move. And I said, no, coach, you can sit here. No problem at all.
Why don't you take Terry's seat?
Yeah. Let's see. 3 people need to sit for 2 seats. It'll be Dusty Bates, Terry Mills, and Brian Bush.
Does his feet touch the ground if he sits in Terry's seat?
Terry doesn't get any special treatment in the tournament. Poor Terry in the, it was the semifinals. I think they forgot a seat somewhere down the line. So me and Terry were like right now where me and John's shoulders are, but that's just a screen. It was real life. Like we were very close in that broadcast on the Maryland game. And then Sunday there aren't the need for 4 radio crews, so we're like spread out. Terry's basically in Fort Wayne compared to where he was on Saturday. But in all seriousness, Dusty is out there, and he was out there for a good chunk of that Texas A&M Yale game. Normally it's just the assistants, but you want to talk about a really unique dynamic where, at 8:15-ish local, whenever that game tipped, an hour before, you've got I think probably 2/3 of Michigan's staff out watching a game that they might not need any information on, but it's just a part of it. And again, I'll get the answer on why that's important to Dusty, that he's out there. Yeah. But this is something that you have to, and Kyle still knows Auburn well, just like, Justin knew Texas A&M a little bit, but the deep dive, the baseline out of bounds plays, the calls out of timeouts, the tendencies that, you have to basically, do a cram session on a team from, Sunday to whenever the game is, Thursday or Saturday. It's a unique deal.
Have you talked to Dusty at all about what the experience that he had with FAU going to the Final Four? How has that been valued, and how is he using that experience now?
So an interesting story with that is that when they won the round of 32 against, remember it was Fairleigh Dickinson, FDU. Right. So Dusty was sitting courtside watching Purdue and FDU, which was really interesting when we talked about Purdue. He said that Braden Smith's growth from that as a freshman to where he is now Big Ten Player of the Year is remarkable. But could you imagine sitting there? Like, we're all human, right?
Yeah.
You are in the 8-9 game. You're playing the last game of the day. And you kind of know, you think yeah, well, we're probably going to win to play the number 1 team in the country. And then that happens. And it's kind of transpiring. This wasn't some late surge from FDU. Like, that game was kind of always close. And you're thinking, okay, now we're a coin flip game away from being a 10-point favorite to go to the Sweet 16 as Florida Atlantic. After they won, I believe that was in Columbus. And their Sweet 16 Elite 8 was in New York. They did not go back to Boca. They flew from Columbus straight to New York. They did not do this here. I don't know if it was even on the table, but with the early the early second round game and then the late Sweet 16 wasn't really necessary. They've had a pretty good chunk of time here to practice, and as Kyle Church alluded to, give them some time off. What I do think it's helped him with, you want to talk about a fire drill of prepping for a game while doing a bunch of interviews. There was no guarantee that Dusty May was going to get some big job. Certainly you take Florida Atlantic to the Final Four, you're probably going to. But even a Sweet 16 appearance, it's not guaranteed. You could flame out the next year and you're not as hot of a commodity or all of that. He is trying to push the brand message of FAU while prepping for something that had never happened in that program's history. I think that has helped Dusty with everything around being the head coach of Michigan. And in particular, here when it gets really crazy. He's still doing interviews. He's still willing to do stuff. He's been great in that regard. In terms of the actual prep, I think he's always going to be pretty locked in. Dusty May will never be ill-prepared, and he will never be unorganized. And I think that's where your question to Kyle about the coaches kind of cross-pollinating from a responsibility standpoint. I think he's learned to empower guys from a very, very young age as a coach. And this is the time of year where you need to have it.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. I've always wondered that, and especially now when we talked to Coach Church, he alluded to it, but it's having to balance the transfer portal, this current roster, next year's roster, decisions that need to be made that can't be made, and also trying to reseed the roster going into next year, but also preparing for now Auburn, the number 1 overall seed. And if that happens, if they get a win there, preparing for Ole Miss and Michigan State, like they're juggling so many different balls right now.
Yeah. And I mean, it'll be less than a 48-hour turnaround again, because Michigan will be the late game. It will end after midnight Eastern, almost certainly. and then it's 2:20 or 5:05, I think, are the two Elite Eight Sunday tip-off times. That's quick turnaround. Buzz Williams said leading up to the game Saturday, coaches don't get a whole lot of sleep at this time of year. It's just part of it. But yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Auburn is really good. I mean, they are every bit a 1 seed until a late season stretch. They were one of the best teams analytically of the century. We'll see. I mean, their A game is as good as any A game of anybody that we've seen in the last 10 years, 20 years in college basketball. Doesn't mean they're going to have it. Doesn't mean Michigan can't do it. But I do like the fact if Michigan can get the wing play that they got from Roddy, from LJ, from Ruben, and hey, I thought it was a smart decision, even if it's tough for the young man. One of my favorites, Nimari Burnett. Nimari Burnett didn't score for only the second time in his career at Michigan. Didn't have a point. Played his fewest minutes of his career here. It wasn't the right matchup. But you get him to hit a couple threes early, it can help a lot. I just love where the rotation is right now. I love how this team's playing. And listen, Michigan should be an underdog. Auburn's that good. But Michigan's been an underdog in 4 of the last 5 games. And the only one they weren't an underdog, they were a 2.5-point favorite against a 12 seed. And that was the most popular. No one knew what a Triton was, but everybody was picking them if they wanted their 12-5 upset to win over Michigan.
Yeah. I mean, it's been so much fun. And it would be awesome if it were to continue even to Elite Eight and then get another bite at that apple.
No doubt. A couple comments before we let you go. Daniel, I hope you're right. That would be nice. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Also cool to see Scott said I wish I would have seen this when Kyle was on, that he met Coach Church at UM baseball game when he first arrived on campus. Truly, the staff is really, really awesome to work with. Big fan. We got a Let's Go Blue. Did want to get to this question from Scott about the spring game, John. That was something that came from Monday's press conference. Your thoughts? I know you're happy about the game happening. Pros and cons of the event. And listen, I'm glad Sherrone Moore mentioned the fans in it, because I really do believe that needs to be a part of the conversation, because as we push for these big games where everybody wants to see the big brands, it is tougher and tougher for a family of 4 or 5 or 6 to bring the whole crew out and see and be in Michigan Stadium, right? We all know the monetary challenges for colleges right now with the impending. We'll see if it's locked in the revenue sharing. But the fans being able to experience having a touch point for Michigan football out of season is not getting talked about nearly as much as, in my opinion, it should be.
Yeah. So, I mean, the pros and cons of having the game. One thing is the fans, like you talked about. I mean, even those are 110,000 tickets on 7 or 8 Saturdays in the fall. It's not an easy ticket, and it's not a cheap ticket. This is an opportunity for you could bring family, friends, whoever you want, and it's free of charge. You get a chance to be in the stadium and see the next iteration of Michigan football. That's a huge pro to having it. In terms of the cons are ones that we've heard about and talked about, and Michigan spring game is going to be April 19th. The portal doesn't close until April 26 or 25, one of those days. So you are exposing yourself, because if it's broadcast on the Big Ten Network, if it's broadcast locally, there's going to be film out there of other coaches being able to watch and see what Michigan players are doing. And, if there's a guy that's buried on the depth chart, but he's still a good player, because Michigan has really good players, even if they're down the depth chart, you risk having those players poached off your roster. The other con is injuries, and we see it every year. There's always somebody that gets hurt, and you don't want it to be anything major, but that's always a risk. Hello, welcome to playing football. It just does. It happens. So I don't think the cons, by any stretch of the imagination, outweigh the pros. The pros are, and when we're talking about, let's go back to some of those conversations that we had about what's being accomplished at practice. You've got Babaloa, who is now entering his 6th padded practice. You got Evan Link, who played 1 game at left tackle. You've got an offensive line that is very raw. You can't get better at playing offensive or defensive line unless you put on the pads and you go out there and practice. And I've used this example. I went from a recruited tight end my freshman year to starting on the offensive line my second year. If I didn't have spring games, or if I didn't have spring practice, because with the reduction in spring games will eventually become the reduction in practices and padded practices. Most people believe that it'll eventually be mirroring what the NFL does, and they don't put the pads on at all during the offseason. So you're going to stunt a lot of growth and a lot of development. Now, it doesn't have to be that way. I think there are ways, if the NCAA, and I'll say this without trying to laugh too hard, if the NCAA is smart, then there'll be a provision in place for those developmental players that need time in pads to improve. And because I wouldn't have made that transition had I not had that. It's also the ability to go in the stadium. And while it's not 110,000 people, when you go in the stadium, the variables change and the pressure changes. It changes just like it does when you go from non-padded to padded in the comfort of the Glick Fieldhouse. Now all of a sudden you're in the big house. Everybody's got big dreams of being in the big house, making big plays. And it changes the dynamic. It changes the experience. Now you put fans in the stands. And again, it's not 110,000 people. The pressure isn't the same as it is with millions of people watching on TV, but it does change the dynamic. It changes the pressure, and you need those exposures, especially as young players. Coaches need to be able to see players in that position, because how many times do we talk about this guy? Hey, practice is okay, looks okay, but then all of a sudden, hey, you go from State Street to Main Street, and this guy's a baller. Like, he's a gamer. Like, there are individuals like that. And so you got to be able to find those. You got to give them an opportunity to step up so you know what you have. And so, I mean, those are just some of them. We could go right down the rabbit hole of the pros and cons. But to me, it's about developing young players into stars at the college level and providing them an opportunity to be good enough to play at the next level.
Well, Michigan charging right ahead for that spring game. We will continue our coverage here on our YouTube live streams. We'll kind of see how things go. I think I'd be around for a live stream next week, even when Michigan is in the Final Four. But we'll certainly keep posting on that. Also, excited to share some of the interviews Jon had with the future NFL Wolverines. Some great ones that'll be coming up on the audio side of the podcast here soon. Any last thoughts, Jonathan Jansen?
Well, full name. Thanks, Mom. I am really excited to continue to share this afternoon, 4:00. It's going to be a full padded practice, and it is so much fun. I know that not a lot of people get a chance to see it. There will be, obviously the spring game. I welcome everybody. It's April 19th, high noon in the big house. Make sure you show up. You want to see what this team is and will be. But I'll do my best, take a lot of notes, and try and venture out past the offensive line to take some notes and some other positions to let you know what's going on in Schembechler Hall.
Yeah, I was a little worried I was going to have to text Kyle and say, hey, sorry. Can you just push it?
We got a guy that won't shut up.
Yeah. Kyle, we thought we'd talk basketball. Actually, what are your thoughts on Evan Link?
I would expect that he would at least know who it is.
Oh, that staff very well versed in the football side, and it was cool hearing Sherrone Moore talk about it at the press conference on Monday as well. All right, for Jon Jansen, I'm Brian Bush. Thanks to all those who followed along, watched here. Check out Max Bredeson, his conversation with Jon on the audio version of In the Trenches coming up early Wednesday morning. And stay locked in. Defend the Block. Still some great episodes from this past weekend. We had the radio show with Mike Boynton Jr. and, of course, Dusty May. We've got that on the podcast feed, MGoBlue Podcasts. That's it for us. We'll talk to you soon here on YouTube and on X, Jon Jansen 77.